Ladies, gents, and everybody in between, welcome back to the Battle of the Atlantic. And, I made a mistake at some point. Several mistakes, actually. First of all, Enneberg has seen better days. She's been sent into dry dock for repairs after having been hit by 3 torpedoes. But the more eagle-eyed amongst you may notice everything else that's joined the repair queue in dry dock. Most critically, HMS Aberdeen. The more pressing mistake I've made was forgetting to press record on OBS when I was playing through week 17, hence why none of the ships are seen getting hit. But what actually happened? So, Edinburgh was on station off Iceland as a part of Tassel's Guardian when they were intercepted by U-boats overnight. The large light cruiser took 3 hits. Later on, Aberdeen was conducting her usual patrols in the North Channel when one of those massive 8-boat wolfpacks finally scored a hit in the most lethal U-boat hunter in the fleet. Sorry, not 1 hit, 2 hits, having a bow blown off in a pincer attack. Of course, Aberdeen was too angry to die, and she actually didn't survive the encounter, if only barely, and now she's going to be out of action for 2 months of repairs, by far the longest repair cycle of any ship thus far. Of course, I had gotten my pound of flesh back in return for the damages incurred, sinking 2 merchant raiders and its escort, plus 8 U-boats, a mix of Type 2s and Type 7s. With all that said and done, what's the situation at the moment? Given that Edinburgh, Task Force Guardian's flagship, was out of action, there had been a slight force rearrangement. The 3 heavy cruisers, Norfolk, Shropshire and Australia, were providing security off Iceland, whilst the other 2 ships of Task Force Guardian, the light cruiser Perth and the destroyer Blisker-Witcher, had rotated to join the carrier group of Task Force Raider. And speaking of Task Force Raider, Formidable and her group were operating directly in the Channel, chasing after a single German corvette off the French coast. This effort had thus far turned up 0 results, and had attracted U-boat attention towards the carrier group. And as it turned out, the other Axis member in Europe had decided to show up. The fucking Italians were here! Not that it mattered much. German or Italian, the offenders were swiftly sent to the bottom. Five of 5. Of course, the other Scourge showed up moments later. Despite a mix of 30 Fulmars and Spitfires providing air cover, Formidable took a hit in fantail from a Ju-88's bomb. Fortunately, she took little damage, and the Ju-87 Stukas that approached were intercepted well before they could reach the carrier. Later on, I decided to send in Perth, escorted by the destroyers Blisker-Witcher, Kasak and Maori, to intercept the lone contact overnight. The raiding party failed to find their intended target, but they did find something much juicier, a convoy transiting through the channel. The destroyers turned in to give chase, opening fire and setting a transport on fire, but Blisker-Witcher, the lead vessel in the column, was hit and set on fire in return. Despite this, the Polish destroyer happily jugged on and cracked one of the German escort ships open, setting her ablaze. With the German forces on the run and one of its escorts sinking, the destroyers turned back in to give chase. In fairly short order, a tanker was set ablaze, and not too long after, the vessel joined a transport and an escort on the bottom. Not to be outdone by a sister ship, the other tanker in the convoy received continuous fire from the force, eventually burning down and sinking as well. Next up on the docket was the convoy's other escort, which got nailed by a salvo from Perth, but as odds would have it, the transport alongside her was struck by a shell which detonated her cargo, rapidly sending her to the bottom. With the range closing to within 5,000 yards, the escort was then struck by a full salvo again, was rendered dead in the water, and sank. With much of the convoy done for, one final transport was subject to the ire of the 35 guns available to the raiding party of the destroyers and a cruiser. The death from 1,000 cuts was slow to come to the stricken transport, but eventually she burnt down, foundered, and sank. Using the cover of darkness to avoid being intercepted by bombers, the raiders took the scenic route around Britain to head back to Liverpool to rearm, while Formidable and her 2 escorts took the channel to get back to base, which bumping into U-boats on the way. With the assistance of Formidable's Felmars, the destroyers Javelin and St. Laurent attempted to find the attacker, but came up empty-handed. Surprisingly, this didn't attract any bombers, but the carrier group ran into U-boats again about 5 minutes later. In response, Formidable launched a full complement of swordfish with depth charges equipped. The clear weather allowed these swordfish to immediately spot the U-boats lurking in the water, vectoring the 2 destroyers on target, before the flight swordfish made attack runs. The first strike was almost perfectly on target, crippling a U-boat, to which St. Laurent carried out the finishing blow. The second aerial attack scored some hits on the second U-boat, but did not do enough damage to render it dead in the water, so a third flight rolled in. This third flight damaged the U-boat even more, forcing it to the bottom, but once again hadn't secured the kill, so a fourth flight rolled in. Yet again, not enough damage, so the fifth flight attacked. And when that didn't work, the sixth flight launched a strike. By this point, almost the entire swordfish package had attacked and done very little apparent damage, so the destroyed Javelin closed in and finished the U-boat off. Finally putting the little tacky little vessel down. This time, the carrier group caught attention from bombers, but they managed to evade detection long enough for nightfall. As daylight came, there was a sighting report made on a convoy transiting the channel. Despite the majority of her escort screen transiting north of the UK, Formidable, Javelin and St. Laurent set sail to intercept, but no sooner had they left port than the South Channel Guard picked up U-boats. After evading the initial spread of torpedoes, Mallow and Camellia got to work. Just another day in the office. Naturally, this attracted some attention from attacking bombers, but the Hurricane Squadron stationed at Plymouth either shot down or broke up the attackers before they got close, so that the 2 Flower-class corvettes could continue operations, picking up a wolfpack of Italian and German boats. Even though the Axis parties were now running combined operations, they were sunk all the same. Mallow and Camellia both turned back to Liverpool to rearm, but had attracted attention from various land-based bombers. Spitfires from Biggin Hill shot down a wave of 18 bombers, but 12 more managed to get through. Mallow avoided being struck, but the already damaged Camellia took 2 hits, causing catastrophic damage. To make matters slightly worse, the Germans were attempting another invasion of Iceland, but before that could be followed up, Hurricanes were forced to take a fight with the Stuke Squadron and then a flight of HE-111s, shooting down more than half of this force before they were forced to retreat for a lack of ammo. Back in Iceland, given that the Germans' heaviest available vessels were a handful of smaller destroyers, they didn't stand much chance against the 3 Cancer-class heavy cruisers defending the area. To make things worse for the Germans, they were actually outnumbered by the cruisers. Things immediately went pear-shaped for the enemy when the lead Type 1923 class destroyer got eviscerated by 8-inch high explosive shells, blowing her apart in short order. The second ship, an even smaller torpedo boat, didn't fare much better, 2 shells blasting off her stern section. Visual contact was briefly lost, but regained, and ultimately the killing blow was scored by HMAS Australia. Back in home waters, Formidable had been tracking the convoy making a run in, and once their air cover was off station, 24 Swordfish were launched to make an attack. Particular attention was put into 2 tankers, although a smaller transport was hit by a single torpedo. Both tankers were completely destroyed, but the arrival of a squadron of Italian G50 Freccia fighters meant that these Swordfish were unable to observe any damage sustained from fires. While the convoy was still continuing its mission, the loss of 2 tankers saw Formidable and her escorts returning to Liverpool, where the raider party had finally arrived home. However, because 3 of the 4 ships are damaged, with Bliskowitzer having been operating for more than 3 months without repair, she, Maori, and Perth were released from command and put into dry dock for repairs. Not far behind, Camellia had survived the bombing by the skin of her teeth, but with more than half of the machinery spaces knocked out and flooded, she was also put into dry dock. In her stead, she was replaced by the Bridgewater-class corvette, HMS Hastings. While things were still most certainly going in my favour, what with most of the Kriegsmarine surface fleet sunk or out of action, my operational surface forces were still thinning out as more and more ships headed in for repairs. Now that Task Force Raider lacked any cruisers, the carrier group was temporarily complemented with 2 new vessels, the Dido-class anti-aircraft light cruiser HMS Phoebe, and the Tribal-class destroyer HMS Zulu. The South Channel Guard set out to continue with their patrol, while Task Force Raider made all steam for the channel to intercept a convoy in the channel making a return trip to Germany. Once again, 24 Swordfish attacked, a tanker becoming the centre of attention, but attacks were also made in the other ships in the convoy. At the end of it all, 2 Swordfish had been lost, but a tanker and a transport were sunk in exchange. Moments after the engagement had ended, the North Channel Guard, which in Aberdeen's absence, the formation was now comprised of the Flower-class corvettes Primrose and Clarkia, came across U-boats in the North Channel. Down south, Task Force Raider had the misfortune of sailing right over a wolf pack. Javelin charged straight into a Type 7 at full speed, sinking her, while Formidable turned sharply to avoid a pincer attack, coming a bee's dick away from taking any hits. After that, and the task force was in the clear and Formidable was safe, the destroyers worked on punishing the transgressors, St. Laurent earning the dubious honour of sinking 2 U-boats right next to each other. The South Channel Guard kept up the momentum, coming across 2 U-boats. Despite being notionally a little less capable than Flower class in the anti-submarine warfare role, Hastings had thus far acquitted herself fairly well. In the meantime, Task Force Raider made a trip across the Atlantic to Iceland to link up with 3 heavy cruisers, whilst in the Americas, Convoy Rempereur ran supplies from Boston to Halifax, and in Liverpool, Resup 1 had arrived to offload supplies from Gibraltar before heading back for the British outpost. Task Force Raider arrived off Iceland just before midnight on the 11th of November, absorbing the 3 heavy cruisers and dissolving Task Force Gdansk. In return, the cruiser Phoebe and the destroyer St. Laurent would attach the reformed Task Force Guardian, assuming the coastal protection role from Norfolk, Australia and Shropshire. The carrier group was sent back to Europe, while the North Channel Guard encountered the Wolfpack. Naturally, they were dealt with. Later in the day, Resup 1 was underway when they were attacked at point blank range by another wolfpack. At such close ranges, there was no space to evade. The transport city of Cairo was hit by 4 torpedoes. As she rapidly plunged beneath the waves, the tanker RFA Dudale took a single torpedo hit, which caused significant damage, but not enough to sink her. The convoy withdrew, having been sucker punched. The loss of the city of Cairo meant she was the first Allied transport to be lost thus far in the campaign, and the second Allied ship to be sunk overall after the loss of ORP Garland 2 months earlier. Sure enough, bombers were sorted to attack the stricken convoy, but luckily their attention was caught by Mallow and Hastings, both of which were handily able to evade the bombs tossed their way. The rest of the day and the night passed uneventfully, which was just as well, because the week of 18 sounded off, and given that I had recorded this at 3 in the morning, I immediately passed out. So, it's been a while since part 11, which, my apologies, I went on a Minecraft binge, and then a League of Legends binge right after, and then after that I was just hellishly busy. Fortunately, I should be back to my usual upload schedule, if in air quotes, if you can call it that. But until then, stay frosty folks, and I'll catch you in the next one.